What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for July 28th, 2023. I am Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great weekend so far. Pretty filler edition of SmackDown on Friday, I thought. Not a bad show necessarily, but not exactly a consequential show before we head into SummerSlam next weekend. Hopefully they have a hotter show on tap for that final Friday Night SmackDown before the pay-per-view next weekend. I typically don't watch those shows in time. I'll be at the pay-per-view next weekend, obviously, so I won't even be reviewing that show regardless, so it doesn't really matter to me. For some reason, I thought the United States Championship match that was officially announced on this show that we'll get to momentarily was happening on that show next week. I don't even know if they advertised anything for that show next Friday. But it's actually taking place in 2 weeks, is that new United States Championship match. They did announce a new match for SummerSlam on this show. They had some more great Bloodline stuff. But that was really the crux of the show. If you didn't catch that stuff, or, check out the Bloodline stuff, obviously. But beyond that stuff, this really was not an important edition of SmackDown. Getting into it now, we open up the episode of Roman Reigns and Jey Uso going face-to-face. Paul Heyman was there as well. You had Solo Sikoa there as well. Now, I may have missed it at the end, but during the opening segment, Paul Heyman was not holding the other two Universal WWE Championship belts. Roman Reigns had his new gold mustard-looking fucking title, but Paul Heyman did not have the other two belts. Now, I don't think that's a case of that they're doing away with them now, because why now? Like, why this week? Why not a month ago, or why not after SummerSlam, or why not after Roman loses, or whatever? Again, Heyman probably had them later on in the show, and I just missed it, but I noticed it during this segment. He had his hands full anyway. He had, like, the lays, or whatever you call them. My apologies for getting that wrong, most likely. But he had those in his hands, so I would assume he didn't have the belts because he had those with him instead. And they probably didn't want Solo carrying the championships for Paul Heyman. If it wasn't going to be Paul Heyman, then they're not bringing the belts out at all. I could be wrong. Maybe Heyman had them out later on in the show, but I would assume, it's weird because I think Heyman, or rather Roman, carrying around 3 championships is so fucking ridiculous, and him continuing to do so for the next, however many months until he loses, very likely at WrestleMania next year, is very dumb. But if you're going to start doing it, you should probably have a culmination of that and not just phase them out of nowhere. So I guess we'll find out. Again, maybe he had them later on in the show and I just completely missed it. Regardless, though, Roman and Jey going face-to-face here in the opening segment. Real good mic work here, per usual. The commentators clarified before the segment kind of got underway that this tribal combat match, which Jey did kind of allude to, which I forgot to mention in the review last week. I don't know why I didn't think that they spoke about this stipulation at all. They did. Jey kind of made it sound like he could do whatever he wants to Roman Reigns, and basically, it's a no disqualification match. It's a fancy way of calling it a no disqualification match. There's no other stipulations attached or anything like that. Obviously, if Jey wins, I guess effectively he becomes the tribal chief. They haven't really spoke about that too much, but he just kind of talked about here, Roman did, about how you can't beat me, Jey. You've never beaten me. No one could beat me. And then Jey brought up, as he should have, well, I fucking beat you, and Money in the Bank. It may not have been one-on-one, but he still pinned Roman Reigns, handing him his first pinfall loss of any kind in over 3.5 years since December of 2019. So they went back and forth. They didn't get physical. They saved that for the end of the show. They bookended the show with 2 strong segments again involving the Bloodline. This was better than last week's segment, their talking segment last week. They didn't really get into too much last week aside from setting the SummerSlam match up for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. This was, had some better mic work, stronger storyline implications here and whatever, making the stipulation clear for the pay-per-view. Not 1,000%. They might show up to this match and there might be some random-ass weapons at ringside. A lot like I forgot what the fuck it was called, but the match that, was it not a Singapore Cane match or something like that? With Big E and Apollo Crews at WrestleMania 37. I forgot what they called it, but they had some sort of a no disqualification match. Like a drum match, and that's not to sound like, I don't know, it was something along those lines, and they had I don't know if they had drums at ringside. It was something very bizarre. It was specific to Cruz's gimmick at that point, like the African culture or something, whatever that he was calling it. I could probably just look it up quickly, but it was something along those lines. I don't know if that's what this is going to be, they're going to play into the tribal Samoan culture stuff with the weapons at ringside, or just it's going to be a standard no DQ match with chairs and tables and shit. I'm not sure, but that's basically what we're in store for at SummerSlam. Our first match on the show was the finals of the United States Championship Invitational, the winner earning a United States Championship opportunity in 2 weeks on SmackDown against Austin Theory. So, not at SummerSlam. They have a full card of 8 matches, which kind of makes it doubtful now that they're going to add Rhea Ripley and Raquel Rodriguez as I thought they would for the Women's World Championship at the pay-per-view. I mean, they could do 9 matches. That's not exactly Triple H's... that's not really how he's been booking things for the last year since he took over creative. Now, I know Vince is obviously in charge as well, but every pay-per-view since the Triple H era kind of started, they've had lesser matches. Even at SummerSlam last year, they might have had 7 or 8 matches, and even Rollins and Riddle got bumped because I think they thought they had too many matches for the show. They didn't want to go too overtime, and it went overtime as it was anyway. So, maybe they were not doing Rhea and Raquel after all, which... It's a bummer in the sense that, yeah, the match wouldn't be a barn burner. They work well together. I'm looking forward to that match. But Rhea wasn't on the card for Money in the Bank. She's the Women's World Champion on Raw. Asuka wasn't at Money in the Bank either, and she's on the card for this show. And it would have been cool to have 4 women's matches on the show. But it looks like they might have been bumped for the fucking Battle Royal, but the Battle Royal gets a certain someone on the card, so it's kind of like pros and cons. We'll get to that later. But the United States Championship is not being defended on the pay-per-view. They made that pretty clear here. It was Rey Mysterio and Santos Escobar one-on-one, I think for the first time ever. Maybe they had a match in Mexico that wasn't in a major organization. Maybe it was in AAA. I thought it might have happened in Lucha Underground. A quick Google search told me that I don't think it happened there, at least one-on-one. So, again, maybe it happened another time. I think I've interviewed them both, and I've asked them both about it. I think they did work together one-on-one another time, at least not in WWE. So as far as I'm concerned, this was the first ever one-on-one match between Rey Mysterio and maybe not King Cuerno, but definitely Santos Escobar. A good match, but that it never really got out of first gear. And they gave it a decent amount of time. It went through 2 commercial breaks. Coming out of the second commercial break, Rey Mysterio got hurt. So I think he got hurt going into the second commercial break. They come out of that commercial break, and they kind of announced that he's hurt. So with that being said, I thought it was. I wasn't exactly sure if it was legitimate or if it was a storyline. I wasn't 1,000% sure. I know Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful had noted initially that he thought it was I wasn't watching SmackDown Live, so I didn't catch this the first time. He said it was a storyline. He deleted that and then said it was a legitimate injury. I got the feeling that it was legitimate just based on, like, they typically just don't end matches coming out of commercial breaks. Typically it's something during the match or it's a climactic moment. Could have been a storyline, sure. I mean, they reported it was real, so I believe that. But I'm just saying the execution of it. Could they execute an injury to look like it was real in the way that they did it here, and it just a storyline? Yeah, but that's not something they typically do. So I was skeptical. So I kind of thought it was legit from the get-go. Maybe I'm just fucking gullible, but it did end up being legit, reportedly. And Rey did actually get hurt. Or at least they didn't think that he could continue. They thought he got his bell rung. And Cole even said that, after he got back in the ring, we kind of thought something was wrong. Hopefully he's okay. Might have been a concussion issue. His head kind of whipped back after Escobar did the dive out to the outside or whatever it was. And it's a bummer because I feel like the match would have gotten even better and really kicked up to that next gear coming out of the commercial break. Again, what we got was good and I enjoyed it. But for the first time ever match between these two, it wasn't what I thought it would be or what it could have been. And I blame the injury. If it was a storyline injury, then that was bullshit. But obviously it wasn't. And it was real and they had to cut it short. So I imagine this would have gone a little bit longer, at least a couple more minutes. And maybe at that point they would have kicked it up another gear. And then Escobar was always slated to win, apparently, which I thought Rey would win. I'm not saying Rey should have won. I was thinking Rey would win, and then Escobar might cost him the title match. And again, that might be too abrupt, because they've been like best friends for months now. For Escobar all of a sudden turn around and turn fucking heel on the guy would seem a little sudden. But they did have a backstage segment reportedly nixed from the show because Rey Mysterio got hurt here. Because Escobar was going to win clean, apparently, I would think. And then Rey Mysterio they would have a segment afterward. Probably just endorsing and maybe teasing tension, who knows. We'll never know because we didn't end up getting it. But Escobar did win. He will challenge Theory for the United States Championship in 2 weeks on SmackDown. I'm looking forward to the match, but what I just don't really understand, if the plan was always to have Escobar win, injury or not, to Rey Mysterio, what I just don't get is that we just got Escobar and Theory last week. And they had a real good match, but Escobar won clean there. So I'm just not really sure why they did that match last week if it was always going to be Escobar and Theory for the U.S. Championship. It should be another good match, but what I'm listen, if Escobar goes 2-0 against Theory, I'm not complaining, and he becomes champion. I think the belt should go to LA Knight, but it's not that big of a deal. More on him later. I just don't know. To me, it makes it more obvious that Escobar's losing. Because it's not often a champion goes 0-2 against the challenger initially in a non-title match. Typically, when the champion loses a non-title match, which should have been enough to earn him a championship opportunity, whether he beat Rey Mysterio or not, then that just doesn't happen. Typically, the champion gets their win back and retains the title. So that's what I'm expecting. I'm thinking Theory walks out still U.S. champion in 2 weeks. I just don't know why they did that match last week if they're going to do Escobar and Theory again anyway in 2 weeks. I just thought that was stupid. Again, this was good. Hopefully this was not the last match that these two have against each other one-on-one, Escobar and Rey. Hopefully Rey's okay. He'll be back soon. He's not that hurt. And they can have another match down the road. Maybe when we get that Escobar-Rey feud. And I'm hoping we do get that. It doesn't have to be imminent. I thought it might be. Because if LA Knight's a babyface, which we'll get into it in a second because that was the next match on the show, they need someone to go to the heel side. They have a lot of baby faces on SmackDown between AJ Styles, Rey Mysterio, Santos Escobar, Cameron Grimes, Sheamus, the Brawling Brutes. They're all baby faces. They have a lot of faces on the show. Not to mention Jey Uso and Jimmy Uso and all these other people they have on the show. Edge, Bobby Lashley. I think I mentioned AJ Styles. They need to turn someone heel. And I think Escobar would be the guy to turn heel. Maybe that incorporates Carlito into the angle at some point. I'm not sure. But we'll see where this goes. I am intrigued. LA Knight interrupting Hit Row coming out of the commercial break, or I guess where they were insulting the audience during the commercial break. I thought this would just be a repeat of the segment from Madison Square Garden, which I was there for that show 3 weeks ago, but I didn't catch the segment live technically. I heard it. I was walking through the corridors of the arena trying to get to my seat. I heard the segment. I didn't actually see the segment until it popped up on WWE.com on the YouTube channel after the show went off the air. So I thought they were just going to do that again because it didn't happen on TV. Except this time they actually did a match. LA Knight faced Ashante the Adonis. He also had some mic time before the match, actually. Which is key, and honestly, I mean, LA Knight should be on a consistent winning streak at this point to really build momentum. But he should also be getting consistent mic time, whether it be while he's walking to the ring, out for a quick segment, whatever it might be. In the back, vignette, the guy needs consistent mic time because that's really his strong suit. This was a nice squash. He beat Adonis in under 2 minutes, as he should have. Exactly what it needed to be. But giving him mic time is even more important, in my opinion. So, there was no indication of what was next for him until a little bit later on in the night backstage when he confronted Adam Pearce about saying, listen, it's a travesty, basically, that I'm not on the SummerSlam card. And then Adam Pearce said, well, listen up. Come SummerSlam, just announced, we're getting a Slim Jim Battle Royal featuring talent from Raw and SmackDown. They didn't say what was on the line. It's just a fucking Battle Royal. Typical WWE, like the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, where it's not even a trophy. What did they get, a lifetime supply of Slim Jims? Like, what are they, fucking Macho Man Randy Savage now? They didn't even say anything would be on the line, like a future United States Championship opportunity or an Intercontinental Championship opportunity. It's like, what the fuck? But anyway, he said LA Knight's in the Battle Royal, as are the Brawling Brutes. The Brawling Brutes also encountered or confronted Adam Pearce and said, we also want in, or at least Sheamus. I think the other two would probably be in there, Ridge and Butch. But Sheamus and LA Knight kind of went back and forth. As a bit of a preview of that Battle Royal next week on SmackDown, I said earlier they didn't advertise anything with that show. That's not accurate. They are announcing, or they are advertising Sheamus and LA Knight for the first time ever one-on-one on that show next week, which I'm looking forward to. It's a battle of the baby faces, because again, the way they booked LA Knight in this match and the way he's been kind of coming across and the reactions he's been getting, there's no way this guy's a fucking heel. He can't be. He's a great heel, but he can't be portrayed as a heel going forward. He's just too popular. He's too popular. The people love him. He's more over than any other babyface on the show. Jey Uso's getting great reactions right now, but no one's getting the LA Knight reactions on SmackDown. Aside from Roman Reigns, who's a heel, and that just makes sense. But we're getting LA Knight and Sheamus next week. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully LA Knight wins. Hopefully he wins this pointless Battle Royal. I'm not saying he's it's guaranteed that he'll win that. Again, without even anything on the line, it doesn't even matter. I'm just glad he's on the show. Maybe it's on the fucking pre-show. They didn't say that. They can announce that the day before the show. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be shocked. They don't do pre-show matches really anymore. They have on a once in a blue moon, if that's the expression. They've done it very rarely in the last couple of years, but not often, ever since we came back from COVID. Pre-COVID, they did fucking pre-show matches all the time. But since COVID, they really have not done kickoff matches at all, which is fine by me. I really don't care. That could end up on the Battle Royal. The Battle Royal, rather, could end up on the kickoff show for SummerSlam, and that's okay. It doesn't really matter. There's nothing on the line, so there's really no incentive for people to care. But at least LA Knight will be in front of that crowd in Detroit at Ford Field for SummerSlam. So it's better than nothing. I'll take that. It's a small victory. It's not him challenging for the United States Championship, but again, it's better than nothing. We then had a women's tag team match, or I should mention this real quick as well on the topic of backstage segments. Asuka and Bayley and Io were on this show. Bayley continuing to be taunted by Shotzi. Io teasing a cash in on Asuka. Asuka is a complete fucking afterthought in this WWE Women's Championship storyline. And she's the one defending her championship at the pay-per-view next weekend. But you would never know it because it's really between the feud and the bad blood is between Bianca and Charlotte. Asuka is a complete afterthought, which is making me think that Asuka is going to retain, which is fine. It looks like they're already kind of looking ahead without focusing on what we're getting right now with Asuka, Charlotte, and Belair. They should kind of focus on that three-way dynamic and not already look forward to Charlotte and Bianca one-on-one and then Asuka and Io. I mean, those are two great feuds right there, but the pay-per-view match is not either of those. It's Charlotte, Bianca, and Asuka. So they should probably focus on that more. But that was not the case here. They had Charlotte and Bianca beating the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, in non-title action. What the fuck else is new? They became champions less than 2 weeks ago. They're already losing their first match as champions. I mean, you can't write this stuff. It wasn't even a DQ finish. They had Charlotte and Bianca win clean. And it wasn't really about Chelsea and Sonya. The match was fine, but it was more so about, can they coexist? That usual crap. And they didn't. I mean, they kind of fell apart at the end, but they did pick up the victory. They didn't brawl afterward or whatever. Asuka never even really appeared in front of the live crowd. This was kind of whatever. Again, the feud feels like it's between Belair and Flair, not really involving Asuka. So the match was whatever, but it didn't really get me any more excited for that WWE Women's Championship Triple Threat match at SummerSlam next weekend. Also backstage, I think it was before that actually, Bobby Lashley confronting the Street Profits again. Now, I don't think they did this on last week's show because I think Montez or Bianca reportedly, if you kind of read between the lines of the reports from last week, one of them either had COVID or was in contact with someone who did. So, because Bianca was not on the show last week, and neither was Montez Ford. They had Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams confronting Bobby Lashley backstage for a quick interaction. We didn't really hear what they were talking about. They just showed them quickly, but no profits. So they were back here. They were sitting down with Bobby Lashley, who kind of said that they need some new threads. Now, Montez Ford always dresses like a star. Angelo Dawkins, not so much. They acknowledged that. They made a joke of that. And Lashley brought in new suits for the Profits. So if they're doing some sort of new Hurt Business Alliance group reunion, whatever the fuck, I'm completely on board with it. It gives the Profits something to do. It gets Bobby Lashley back on TV. I like this. I'm intrigued. I'm curious to see where they go from here. Karrion Kross going one-on-one with Karl Anderson, like anyone gave a shit. Anderson said before the match to the rest of the OC backstage, listen, I want to go at this alone. He did, and he lost in like 2 minutes to Karrion Kross. I'm glad Karrion won, as he should have. Anderson's just a fucking tag team guy who gives... I mean, no one really gives a shit about Karrion Kross either, but people give less of a shit, I would think, about Karl Anderson than they do Karrion Kross. But anyway, so Karrion Kross winning here with his new finisher. I think the Final Prayer is what he calls it. It's actually pretty cool. It's like a modified F5. It looks pretty sick, actually. He choked out Anderson afterward. AJ and Michin making the save. So the feud continues. Does anyone give a shit about this feud? I mean, they already had AJ beat Karrion Kross fucking twice. So this whole excuse from a week or two, or 3 weeks ago when they had their match at MSG, oh, Karrion's hurt. He's going to be written off maybe. He's not. He's still on the show. He didn't fucking go anywhere. Maybe he was hurt that night because he had his leg wrapped up. I don't think it's been wrapped up since then. Maybe they cut the match short. People were saying they cut the match short due to the injury. I never really believed that. I acknowledge that possibility. And it is possible. I think they just cut the match short because that Bloodline segment on that MSG show went so long. And that match got the short end of the stick. They weren't cutting short Grayson Waller and Edge, I'll tell you that much. So AJ and Karrion Kross went like fucking a minute instead of 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the fuck. Not that people would have really cared anyway. I love Karrion. He kind of needs a makeover or something. This feud just ain't doing it. It's keeping them busy. But it's just that. It's something to keep both men busy. It's getting Karrion on the show. He beat Karl Anderson. Oh, great. I don't give a shit. AJ fucking, I mean, come on. I mean, he doesn't feel important. This is kind of a waste of time. This isn't really leading. I mean, if they lead to a third match and AJ wins again, then Karrion might as well just pack his bags. I mean, again, who gives a shit at that point? Who even gives a shit now? I assume they'll interact in the Battle Royal at SummerSlam. They'll be on the card in that sense. So that's better than nothing, right? I mean, it is what it is. We get to the main event, Jey Uso. Main event Jey Uso taking on main event Grayson Waller, who claims to have main evented Madison Square Garden, which he technically did against Edge a couple of weeks ago. This was a good match. It wasn't really about Waller, and Uso and Waller got into it backstage after the opening segment, which is why this match was set up. I don't like that Waller lost again. He wasn't going to win. He wasn't going to beat the number one contender to the WWE title at the pay-per-view coming up next weekend. But he was in there to he was made to look competitive. He had a good showing in defeat. He's an impressive athlete. He had a good showing here. I enjoyed the match. I just don't like that he's continuing to lose. He lost to Edge. Okay, fine. Don't mind that at all. Then he lost the 4-way. The U.S. Championship Invitational that he probably should have advanced in. Even if he lost in the finals, he should have won that fucking 4-way. And he got pinned! He got pinned in that 4-way a couple of weeks ago. And then he lost again here. Again, that's not a bad spot to be in main eventing SmackDown, but the guy's got to win. He has not won a single match in the main roster. That's got to change soon. Jey Uso winning even with the distraction from the bloodline at ringside. Jey Uso getting the better of Roman Reigns after the matchup, hitting him with the splash. The same splash that he pinned him with at Money in the Bank. And the crowd was super hot for Jey here, as they were at the beginning of the show, as they closed the show here. Jey Uso is super over right now, and it's great to see. Ultimately, though, before he could hit another splash, or I thought he hit the splash on Roman. Maybe he was going for another one, I don't know. But Solo stopped him from doing it. They double-teamed Jey, hit their tag team finisher with Solo hitting the thumb, the Samoan spike, and Roman hitting a spear. It's a pretty fucking sexy finisher, if I do say so myself. They executed it and timed it well, so it looked good. And they closed the show standing tall over Jey Uso. Good stuff here. The best parts of the show were the bloodline stuff, again. Escobar and Rey didn't really get a chance to be what I thought it could have been. Again, I enjoyed it, but it could have been better with more time and if Rey didn't get hurt. So that was disappointing. LA Knight being on the show is great. Getting the guy consistent television time is key. Continue to do so, please. He's on SmackDown next week, which is great, against the notable name in Sheamus. Hopefully he wins. He's also going to be at SummerSlam, which is also great. So I look forward to that. The women's stuff didn't really do it for me this week. It was fine. Again, it was just ineffective, and the focus being on Charlotte and Bianca and not Asuka really at all. Asuka was on the show backstage for like 30 seconds, but that's about it. They got to do a better job of that. The Karrion Kross, AJ Styles stuff is fine, but I don't really care. I am intrigued by the Hurt Business, Bobby Lashley, Prophet stuff. It might not even be Hurt Business related, but it just kind of feels like that to me as it does to everyone else. So a decent show, decent SmackDown this week. Not a bad show, more of a middle-of-the-road show, if anything. And hopefully they have a hotter show on tap for SmackDown next week, 24 hours out from SummerSlam. Thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We should have a SmackDown Lowdown review also coming out a little bit later on today, so keep an eye out for that. And that's about it. I mean, also more videos coming up tomorrow. My Collision on-site report. I'll be at Collision tonight in Hartford. I look forward to that. So keep an eye out for my review of that show coming up tomorrow. Dark Side of the Ring review as well, coming up from this past Tuesday, which I have yet to watch, but I'll catch it up. I'll catch up on it soon. Review it tomorrow. I think it was on Bam Bam Bigelow, so I look forward to that. But have a great one, guys. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.